Okay, well, Veritas48 has made a response to me as part of a mammoth response that seemed to go on for days. It probably wasn't quite that long, of which my segment was about 10 minutes. And so this is a response to some of the points he has to bring up there. Now, it got off to a bit of a bad start, I have to say, a shaky start. In his sidebar, he'd called me Neoplum. On this little index that he'd put up a few minutes into the video, he'd called me Neoplum. And it kind of went from bad to worse, Veritas, didn't it?
Okay, the next person I'm going to be responding to is Neoplum99.
I kind of felt for you when I saw that, because I thought, you must have thought, oh shit, when you realised the mistake you'd made there, because there's no way of undoing that really, is there? But it actually got worse, didn't it? But you've asked a specific question. Is absence of evidence evidence of absence? And let's be clear on this. We're talking about evidence of absence. We're not talking about proof of absence. Certainly isn't proof of absence, but is it evidence of absence? Well, very much so. It certainly can be.
Okay, I'm going to call you Neo from this point on because it sounds cooler and it's short.
It's certainly shorter, it just doesn't happen to be my name. And I wouldn't want to make all my videos in a long leather trench coat looking all too much like Venom Fang X. That doesn't really appeal to me. So we'll leave the Neo bit aside. And now I suppose you're in a more positive epistemic situation with regard to my name. Call me Noel, call me Jim. We can probably move on with the video.
Anyway. I don't think you are. I don't think so. I don't think you're in a positive epistemic situation like you would be with the murder example. And I gave a single reason for this earlier on in my series, in which I made the claim that God may have sufficient reasons for not being so transparent. Now, instead of offering more reasons than that, I'm simply handing the ball to you and asking what good reasons are there to think that you, in fact, are in a positive epistemic situation when it comes to God and the aphorism.
Well, one of the reasons I have, straight off the bat, is about 2 billion Christians telling me that God wants to have a personal relationship with me. You see, this is the problem I have with this point, Veritas. I understand some of the arguments you've made against me in this video, which is what you're suggesting is that I am addressing your specific God of choice, whereas that's not the case that you're making the claim for. But you've put specific criteria to the God that you are making this claim for, which is, and I'll go through them as you've put them yourself, a single personal agent responsible for all of creation, who is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and who has the classic properties of being omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, and self-existent. Now, I'm well aware that you've chosen these properties because none of these properties will specifically exclude your God. So that makes sense from your perspective, doesn't it? You can back up these properties now, and then you can inject these extra criteria of your specific chosen faith position at a later date. But when you now bring on this argument to me that, well, perhaps God doesn't want to be revealed, perhaps he wants to remain hidden, perhaps he wants to make it impossible for us to determine his existence, what you're actually doing is you're now subdividing the category of deity you're talking about to one which excludes your specific God. Because your God, well, as I've said, there's this claim. The whole of Christendom makes this claim that God wants to have a personal relationship with you, Noel Plum. He doesn't want to remain hidden from you. He wants to reveal himself to you. He wants you to know him. Well, this isn't a God who wants to remain hidden, is it? So this is why I bring this up, because I'm quite happy for you to make this deistic claim, as long as it will eventually be able to include your God. But once you include criteria like this, what you're actually doing is down the line, you're going to exclude your God. So when you start arguing that later on, well, it's a bit too late then for me to start bringing it up. It's a lot better for me to flag that right here and now.
I think that's a very unfair statement. But if you're going to make the claim that the whole host of theistic evidences that have been presented thus far by people like myself have, as you put it, been cast to the wayside, then you now need to show that this has been the case. I mean, I think natural theology, for example, has been incredibly rich in its formulation of arguments for God's existence. I mean, why do all of these fail to you?
But I haven't said they do all fail to me. This is the problem. You've really seriously misrepresented me here, Veritas, and I've got a problem with that. You showed a clip of me, but it really seriously misrepresented my video. What I'd said in my video is that selectively evidences or potential sources of evidence had been jettisoned. Things which could have been falsified have been brushed under the carpet, and only certain bits have been maintained. Certain parts of the Bible are quoted because they suggest the kind of God which is specifically very, very difficult to falsify. So you can talk about these deeply philosophical arguments and say, why do these fail to you? That's not what I'm talking about. But what was really telling in your response, and I think almost an indication of the level of absence of evidence, is that I was talking about empirical evidence and you just went straight to philosophical argument, as if that kind of fills the gap somehow. You know, there have been lots of studies, even in more recent times, Jewish archaeologists looking for evidence of the Exodus, studies into the potential veracity of intercessory prayer, people trying to make a case exceedingly badly, a receding case now into the possibility that we have an immaterial, immortal soul. These are the kinds of things that I was referring to, not the kind of philosophical mumbo-jumbo that really doesn't get us anywhere. You know, I don't dislike philosophy. Maybe I come across that way. I think philosophy is great for scoping out the potential questions that we could ask or the potential answers that we could find. But when it comes to actually proving something, when it comes to actually demonstrating something, it is always trumped by a single piece of empirical evidence. Just to give you a little tale interject here, when I was a child I was very interested in the existence of the Loch Ness Monster, whether a plesiosaur or a population of plesiosaurs existed in Loch Ness in Scotland. And you would often get articles in the paper, and it just made me think, you know, how would I have felt at the time, how would people have felt at the time if there'd been a headline that said something like, a new philosophical argument has been discovered proving the existence of the Loch Ness Monster. I think people would have laughed it off the front page, wouldn't they? Nobody would have given it any time. Nobody would have given it any credence. We wanted some actual physical proof that a Loch Ness Monster exists, or some proof that a Loch Ness Monster does not exist. Now, the best that you're entertaining me with is philosophical arguments, but that wasn't what I was talking about. So maybe you're right. Maybe that's all that's left now is philosophical arguments, but that certainly wasn't the case. It wasn't the case in the three examples I gave you earlier, and they're just recent things. You know, go back hundreds of years, go back a couple of millennia, and there was a lot more potential sources of potential falsifiability to the God that you effectively believing in. That's the point I'm making. I accept your point that you're trying to make a very, very general, non-specific notion of God. That's what you're trying to defend. So I want to leave those to one side for now, on that ground.
If we were in fact discussing the reasons you are not believers in the Christian God, but we're not. The goal of all of this right now is to assess the aphorism. That is the absence of evidence, evidence of absence when it comes to X. And in this case, X is a timeless, spaceless, immaterial personal agent responsible for all of creation and has the classical properties of being omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, and self-existent. That is far more than sufficient for this discussion, as well as in addressing the non-existence of God debate.
Okay, well, firstly, I don't actually think that those are sufficient. In fact, I think they go too far. That these classic properties of omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, omnibenevolence, I'd remove them from there. I'm a big fan of Nick Bostrom's simulation argument. In fact, I made a video on it some time ago and explored that with relation to what would that mean for God. I don't think those, I think you're excluding potential deities of the kind that you really ought to be considering in that. And at the same time, I think that what you're potentially doing is including deities that you shouldn't, because what you're saying effectively, I think, is that is it possible that an utterly undetectable God is utterly undetectable? Yes, absolutely. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence for an utterly undetectable God. So as long as you maintain a position of utter and total undetectability, then you have my undying support in this. But if you start talking about your God, well, as long as you don't mention any methodology by which there could be some detection, I'm still with you. I'm really interested to see how you're going to frame a Christian God in a totally undetectable way. That one, well, that's obviously one for the future, isn't it? So perhaps we'll come to that. I've made the point I need to make there, and so I'm prepared to leave all those other arguments to one side on the basis of that. Okay, well, I've just done a time check. I'm running a bit low on time. I only have 11 minutes. I can't make huge videos like you can, unfortunately. There were two other things that I wanted to discuss with you. One was the age of the earth with relation to the Bible. The other one was this goblin example. The goblin thing, I think you seriously misunderstood the point I was trying to make. So then you thought I'd been inconsistent in suggesting that it'd be better to have come from a purely deistic position. But that's because you'd misunderstood the goblin example. Now, I tried to clear that up on the age of the earth up in your comment section to your video. What I will do is I'll just put them on the sidebar here so that anybody else who doesn't have to trawl through all the comments that you've received on your video. I really enjoyed your video. It's a fantastic effort to make a 55-minute video, and I look forward to hearing what you've got to say next. Look after yourself. Thank you for watching, everybody.